Why'd you leave Boston?
I've been on quite the adventure, little brother.
I reckon it's got something to do with that girl.
It's got everything to do with that little girl.
7 years ago, Naughty Dog created a new IP that brought together emotional storytelling and amazing character development into a tired genre that had not seen many new ideas in a long time. They brought their stellar talents to this new game and created an instant masterpiece. Last of Us is one of my favourite games of the PS3 generation. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to enjoy it when it came out, but when the remaster was released, I was quick to lap that up. I was instantly connected to the journey of Joel and Ellie as they travel across a post-apocalyptic version of America.
We don't have to do this. You know that, right?
What's the other option?
Go back to Tommy's. Just be done with this whole damn thing.
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done. It can't be for nothing.
It was a perfect story that didn't need another game. But then, in 2020, Naughty Dog has released Last of Us 2. Last of Us 2 is a beautiful game, possibly the best looking game on PlayStation 4. Unfortunately, whilst the game looks amazing, there is a serious lack of meaningful character development and storytelling, which is something incredibly important to a series such as The Last of Us. Last of Us is nothing without its story. Sure, it has fun gameplay, but it's the characters you connect to. Naughty Dog have created memorable characters, such as Jak and Daxter, Nathan Drake, Crash Bandicoot, and of course Joel and Ellie. Each one of these characters have instantly recognizable designs, with relatable personalities to boot. They place these characters into high quality narratives which are exciting and easy to follow. One of their most awe-inspiring narratives was The Last of Us. Last of Us is an incredibly emotional story. Joel was a survivor who had seen his own daughter die on the day of the outbreak of the cordyceps virus, a very real world virus that infects ants mainly. But the game asks, what if it jumps to humans? When it comes to Joel's heartbreaking beginning, we're not just told about it, we witness his own daughter's death. You can feel the raw emotion as a man loses his daughter. When we rejoin Joel, he has forgone any emotional attachment to anyone, becoming a hardened and bitter man. Ellie was a child born into this broken world. She had watched everyone she had loved die, but she did not let that break her. She was immune to this virus and had felt a need to make her life mean something. Joel received a mission to bring Ellie to a faction called the Fireflies. They were in the process of creating a vaccine that could stop this virus and hopefully give humanity a second chance. Joel and Ellie grew to rely on each other, and Joel could finally connect to another human being. When he brought Ellie to the Fireflies, they told him that to make the vaccine, they'd have to kill her. So when he saw his second chance at a daughter put at risk, he slaughtered the Fireflies before they could even make a cure. Joel lied to Ellie, and Ellie knew that their relationship had taken a wound that she was unsure would ever heal. For the sequel, Naughty Dog wanted to create emotional reactions and those hard-hitting story beats. They wanted to create something that could stand above and beyond what came before. The task of creating a sequel is a daunting one. Empire Strikes Back is often used as an example of a sequel which excels at reintroducing the audience to the world of the Jedi, ups the stakes, and returns a cast of characters that fans of the series had grown attached to. On the other hand, The Last Jedi disappointed many with its poor writing, boring characters, and odd pacing. It seemed as though many decisions by Rian Johnson were to subvert expectations, but not to tell a good story. To many, sequels are seen as a cash grab that cannot justify their own existence. Occasionally, a sequel will trump its predecessor. Revenge stories are popular in modern day media. We love to see Nazis get scalped a la Inglourious Bastards, dog killers get their just desserts in John Wick, or a bloody bride eliminates her former colleague in Kill Bill. These narratives are steeped in blood and gore, and we love them because seeing horrible people get what's coming to them is a cathartic experience. But how does this connect to The Last of Us 2, you ask? Whilst gameplay is competent and it's a technical marvel, this sequel lacks the components that made the original so special and so memorable. The Last of Us 2 is a revenge story, and it explores how revenge can affect individuals. Unfortunately, it has as many misses as it does hits in this regard. Beyond these issues, The Last of Us 2 suffers from a lack of character development, poorly structured plot, and a game that is far too long for its own good. Now that we have the intro out of the way, I'd like to introduce you to my review of The Last of Us 2.
I'm just a poor, wayfaring stranger, traveling through this world of woe. There is no sickness, no toil nor danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my mother. She said she'd meet.
Joel, fucking get up! Please stop! Please don't do this! Joel, please get up! No!
I want to address the death of Joel. When I first witnessed this event, it made sense to me. It shocked me, and I was intrigued to see what would follow. But then I played it over again in my head.
You don't get to rush this.
And again. And again. And again. Something didn't sit right. Why was Joel not suspicious of Abby? Why in all of the marketing material was an older Joel used a lot in a lot of the scenes? It's simple. They lied. Now, I'm okay with it in a Marvel movie, where Disney deliberately films scenes that won't be in the movie. But here, it doesn't make any sense. It's a clear lie. Realistically, Joel should not have trusted her, given his past, and the fact that Jackson had been attacked by hunters previously.
To have the guys that we would need to do this smart, we'd be leaving Jackson vulnerable.
So they just get to get away with this?
Nobody wants that.
Yeah, but that's what's happening.
What if we get hit by hunters again?
Is this you talking or is this her?
It's a valid point.
So, what about his killer? Abby starts the journey much the same as the other protagonist, Ellie. Ellie is reintroduced to us, and soon enough she's fueled by revenge. But as the story progresses, her character bends and eventually breaks, leaving an individual who has lost the only good thing in her life, mirroring Joel's journey, which is rather interesting. Unfortunately, whether it's because they felt obligated to make the game longer for whatever reason, or they wanted to stretch this story out far beyond its normal limits. A longer story doesn't make for a better narrative. Movies are typically between an hour and a half to 2 hours long, and need to be tightly constructed narratives to keep the audience engaged. For example, Last of Us is at 15 hours, which is reasonable when it comes to a video game. But when we look at The Last of Us 2, it's 25 goddamn hours and it just never stops dragging. Look at Red Dead Redemption 2. That game is at least 50 goddamn hours. A lot of it is fantastic, but a lot of it is needlessly padded out. Roughly half the game is dedicated to telling Abby's story. She's a trained soldier, which is reflected in the gameplay, with a heightened combat-focused approach. The set pieces during her portions of the game are highlights for me, especially the boss fight with the Rat King, which is incredibly interesting and horrific. Unfortunately though, her story is a drag, filled with needless flashbacks that had nothing meaningful to her character. There's even a love triangle in both Ellie's narrative and Abby's narrative. Whereas in Ellie's narrative, it doesn't become anything, it just is rather forgettable. Though in Abby's narrative, it's basically a central plot point. The only reason it's there is to create drama and to make some characters completely unlikable, such as Mel and Owen. The point where Abby's narrative becomes the sole focus of the game is an incredibly pivotal moment of the story, but the narrative decides to tear you away from that story for at least 5 missions of arguably brilliant gameplay, but a story that's incredibly lacking. Abby's narrative worked a lot better when we were shown brief snippets. It's as if the story tries to start off a completely separate narrative that reintroduces a new batch of characters and gives a greater emphasis on characters you've already met. The problem is though, I don't care about half of them, and we already know half of their fates. There's one aspect of her narrative that aggravates me, besides the love triangle. Before Abby's section begins, Ellie kills Owen and Mel, 2 of Abby's so-called friends. She kills them in the aquarium, which is a pivotal location in all of Abby's story. Problem is the narrative keeps using this location for other setups. When I keep seeing that aquarium, I just want to see the story progress. I don't want to see the story drag anymore. Side characters are barely fleshed out. We're given the skeletons of these characters, but not the flesh. Characters like Lev, Jesse and Dina are likeable, but I wasn't given a chance to understand them as individuals. Jesse is the cocky ex-boyfriend, and Dina is the caring upbeat friend, but these characters are not developed beyond these archetypes. When I think back to my previous video, where I spoke about how the game was constantly rewritten, certain characters were re-evaluated because, according to playtesters, they didn't like the characters they had already developed. Which begs the question, were Lev, Jesse and Dina have a greater sense of character? Because the lack of development with them is rather confusing, because in The Last of Us 1, every character had a sense of personality and you got to understand them. Even characters you weren't around with for a long time, you got a sense of who they are and what they were doing in the apocalypse. It's especially frustrating that a character like Lev does not get much development at all, as he is one of the few trans characters in major AAA games, though I hardly know anything about him and his character. His purpose is mostly used for the narrative to show how hateful this world can be to someone outside this society's new structure. Last of Us 2 attempts to ask the question, is revenge worth it? Is it worth the pain and psychological damage you will do to yourself and others? Unfortunately, the writing barely touches on this, and while it does say, it doesn't say very well. Abby is allowed her revenge against Joel, but Ellie is not. Ultimately, the story is about breaking the cycle of revenge, but for a game which poises itself as a story of revenge, it does not deliver the goods, and that will make many players feel let down, lied to and betrayed. Despite my issues with the characters and story, The Last of Us 2 excels in other areas, and that mainly has to do with the gameplay and technical aspects. This sequel ramps up the sense of scale, as we are allowed to peek into the lives of people and factions which have carved their civilizations into this new society. The Scars exist in a post-technology society, as they live in wooden huts and survive off the land. The WLF is a militarized militia that wants to bring back some sense of society, and will stop at nothing to achieve this. And Jackson is a society that has tried to carve out some sense of normality in this fractured world. I really get a sense of the different moralities of these new communities. which is what shines through in this game. Graphically, the game is gorgeous. Seeing the snow crack and move under the weight of your feet is beautiful and really adds to these locations. The homes we're presented with feel lived in, like whoever lived in these locations were just trying to survive while the world around them fell apart. There's a greater sense of openness in Last of Us 2 as well. There are some sections that are rather open, and you can freely explore these sections to your heart's content. There isn't really a lot of them though to make much of a difference. This isn't a God of War 2018. Character models have greatly improved since the first game. You really get the sense of age in Joel, and the sense of raw rage in Ellie. The facial animations are amazing, and it's a true testament to the acting ability of the actors behind these characters. Additionally, Naughty Dog have made many improvements with systems and gameplay, making it feel much better to play than it was before. Gunplay still feels weighty. It works in a setting like this. I don't expect to pop headshots off as easily. Stealth has also improved a lot. We have a greater sense of freedom when it comes to tackling these scenarios. You can completely avoid the scenario and keep progressing, or you can silently take out the bad guys one by one. Dogs have been added to the scenarios for increased difficulty, as they can hunt you down and sniff you out. There is something I want to bring up when it comes to stealth. It's how the game communicates to you whether you're seen or not. Like Last of Us 1, the game communicates this to you through a little rumble sound in your ear. The problem is though, it doesn't accurately tell you where the enemy is, and it leads to frustration. If it's meant to give a sense of anxiety, it doesn't really work. This is odd because in the accessibility options, you can set so you can hear individual items in the map. What would have been excellent is if you do the scan ability, it allows you to pinpoint exactly where enemies are using your ears. Naughty Dog has attempted to make the game less fun by occasionally triggering an event where an NPC will beg for its life, which should make you feel guilty because you're coldly murdering this begging individual, who no doubt had families, jobs, dreams and aspirations. In actuality though, it pulls you out of the experience as it defies logic that after being cracked around the back of the head, that this character would proceed to proclaim that you're not hard enough to kill them. It feels childish in this grim dark reality. This gameplay aspect reinforces the idea that this game gives the impression of choice, but has none of it at all. Sure, it has it in the stealth, but doesn't have it in the narrative aspects. For example, the screen will show up a square button to give the idea that you have choice in this matter, but you don't. You press it, that's it. There's no other way out of this situation. And this irritates me because there are many points in this game where choice would have greatly improved this experience. They give every enemy a name, which is meant to give each character you fight a bit of character. But the problem is, these are just lines of code. They just go Steve and that's it. They don't go further with it.
Casey? Answer me. Come on, talk to me.
I would have loved to have seen an NPC go absolutely insane if you shot their friend in the head. The Arkham series of games managed to give enemies a sense of personality that felt realistic. This was achieved by merging the environments with the enemies you fought. And occasionally, you would hear the Joker telling his men that you are here, the Batman. But when it comes to The Last of Us, there isn't that same sense of escalating tension. The enemies won't change up their tactics. They won't place traps, they won't try and actively hunt you down, they'll just go on the same path again and again. At times, combat with infected can feel incredibly tense, as they are far more vicious than they were last time. In particular, I love the sections with stalkers. They will avoid your sight and try to sneak up behind you, reminding me of something from Jurassic Park. The homage to great cinema doesn't stop there though. Some of Abby's sections look to imitate the atmosphere of The Thing and Alien, and these moments were real highlights. The fungal zombies have been made to look more terrifying too, with clickers stretching their neck to listen for the sound of their next meal. Last of Us 2 has plenty of accessibility options for players with disabilities, including extending required reaction times and rewarding players with more resources. The game caters to everyone with many colorblind options and text-to-speech functions, and the ability to highlight particular items in the environment. This is the standard that all video games should be aiming for. Unfortunately, many games have limited accessibility, and as a result, many gamers with disabilities cannot play games they are interested in. Sound design in The Last of Us 2 has been done amazingly well. Gustavo Santaolalla and the sound mixers have done a terrific job with the music and the sound design. He brings his expertise from the cinematic realm to the video game realm. Music in tense situations can really get across the heart-pounding nature of the scene. In the first part of my Last of Us 2 review, I explained how damaging crunch culture could be to people who create these games. Yes, the game is beautiful, it sounds great, and the gameplay is incredibly tight for the most part, and the people who worked on this game should be commended for such an amazing job. But honestly, is it worth it for the damage it will do to their physical and mental health? I keep getting reminded of the gun upgrade animations within the game. Now, in a normal game, they wouldn't have these long goddamn animations, and you can't skip them, which means it impacts the gameplay experience. The Last of Us 2 feels thinly spread in contrast to the original, which knew exactly what it wanted and managed to do it in a reasonable amount of time. Whilst The Last of Us 2 is an achievement from a gameplay and technical standpoint, the story and characters are weak and the experience feels fractured. I give The Last of Us 2 a 6 out of 10.